one day, while sitting outside the cave at Charan Paduka with Babaji, he suddenly turned around and said, now tomorrow we are going to leave for Tolingamat on the way to Kailash. I was very excited because, as I said earlier, there was the old Buddhist Lama who was living in one of the caves in Charan Paduka. He had mentioned about Tolingamat to me. He said that across the border into Tibet, not too far from the Indian border, there was a famous Buddhist monastery called the Tolingamat. I was very excited because I had always thought of walking into Tibet and seeing monasteries and sadhus and lamas there. So Babaji said, yes, we are going tomorrow. So all preparations were made. In the morning, we went to see the Ravalji. I was waiting for what the reaction would be, because the Ravalji had first of all discouraged me from being there, saying that there are no genuine sadhus or no genuine, he had not heard of any genuine yogis, and that I was wasting my time looking for a guru and so on. So I thought, what would be the reaction when Babaji meets the Ravalji? So we went. I was surprised because the Ravalji stood up and prostrated before Babaji and said, oh, this young gentleman has found you. And Babaji said, yes, I have found him. He said, yeah, I was discouraging him from falling into the hands of false gurus and frauds. Babaji said that was a good thing to do. So, but the most surprising aspect of this was that Babaji was speaking in Malayalam, and that also in the northern Malayalam accent, northern side of Malayalam, which the Ravalji also spoke, from a Nambudri family from Payanur, which is in the northern end of Kerala. They spoke for some time, and then all preparations were made. Ravalji said, we are making all preparations, Babaji, don't worry, and so on. We also provided with a Nepalese man. I think his name was some Bahadur, I can't remember that, not Tegh Bahadur, some Bahadur. Anyway, so this man was supposed to accompany us, and a Marwadi merchant provided us with tents and horses. So we started out armed with a gas stove and kerosene oil and so on. But before we did that, while we were going, I sat down quietly, and Babaji was standing up and looking at the river. I asked him, Babaji, are you from Kerala? Are you a Malayali? So, are you a Malayali? Babaji said, why do you ask? I said, it's because you are speaking in perfect Malayalam with Nambudri. He said, no, I am not from Kerala. Oh, then he said, so you must be thinking the same which most people think, that Babaji must be omniscient, he knows any language in the world. He said, that is not the case. He said, there is no human being on this earth born of a father and mother biologically who is omnipresent, omnipotent or omniscient. He said, there are always limitations, there is no such thing. I said, then how do you know the Malayalam which you are talking, since you are not from Kerala? He said, but there are ways in which you can connect to somebody else's brain and understand temporarily what that person is thinking of, tune into somebody's brain and use his knowledge. That's all one can do. Nobody can be omniscient. So I said, okay. I said, that is not a full explanation. I still want to ask you, where are you from? He laughed and said, we'll discuss that later. Anyway, so the next day we started off. Babaji, the Nepalese Gurkha, I started calling him simply Bahadur. So Bahadur and myself, plus 2 horses, one for carrying the tents and other things and one for emergencies, some cooking pots and gas stove and so on, with good supply of drinking water, which was put in pots and tied on both sides of the podi. Started off. Now, this path which we were taking is not frequented by most people who go to Kailash. It's the old route which is supposed to have been the route taken by Sri Rama when he visited Kailash in the ancient times. So now hardly anybody goes. Anyways, about 35 kilometers from Mana, you come across the Indian border from where Tibet starts. It's all controlled now by the Indo-Tibetan border police. That time there was not much of a police or army presence there. Anyway, so we went up to Vashishta Gufa, camped at Vashishta Gufa for the night, and next morning we started off towards Kailash. Now the path to take is to follow the course of the Saraswati river. There is no other way you can find out. Babaji apparently knew the path, and this Bahadur who came with us, he said he had once travelled with some merchants trading in Tibet, across Tibet. So we passed the Saraswati river. We came to a place called Keshav Prayag, where the Saraswati meets Alkananda, and then from there we started. There was no path actually, we had to climb over rocks, many places, and walk along. River followed us throughout, it was beautiful. And then the sights of the Himalayas are something that's so thrilling. At a distance I could see the Nila Parvat, the blue mountain. We have Nilgiris here, but they are not half as blue as the Nil Parvat. And snow covered, other peaks jutting out from the scene. And nothing but snow all around, hardly any vegetation, and becoming colder and colder day by day. In about 13 days or so, traveling this way, camping at places where there was a small clearing, where this Bahadur used to clear up the snow and the ice and pitch the tent and cook food for us, we proceeded. Babaji, of course, as usual, never slept, but I slept soundly throughout the journey because I was dead tired. Meditation, of course, every now and then Babaji would wake me up from meditation saying, this is not Turiya, this is Sushupti, deep sleep. Anyway, so we passed a wonderful time. I had some discussions also with him during that period. Part of it I have written in the autobiography, but not the whole thing. One was about the Nath Panth to which he belonged. And the other was his connection with Sri Guru Babaji, who was his Guru. So finally we came to the Mana Pass, the famous Mana Pass. We crossed the Mana Pass. It took us a whole day to go because the Mana Pass is 18,000 miles above sea level. So we had to cross it. While we were crossing, there was a terrible storm. Somehow we managed, although I was shivering. The Gurkha had a lot of experience in that, so he was fine. He wore a thick coat, but Babaji, as usual, wore only the small cloth which he normally wore, bare-bodied. And I was wearing thickly clothed in all kinds of woolen things and a woolen cap and a muffler. Babaji said, you better wear it, otherwise you will fall sick. So we went. Finally, we cleared the Mana Pass and came down to the Tibetan side in about 2 days. Suddenly we found that the temperature had become not so severe and the earth was reddish, a lot of red mud there, and people were growing small little herbs and little bit of vegetable and all that. In about 4 days, halting in the night and so forth, we reached Toling Mutt. Now this Toling Mutt is situated in Tibet. One of the most important features of the Toling Mutt is that it has a Buddha whose head touches the roof of the monastery. It's a huge Buddha. And also around Buddha in that monastery there are so many other Hindu gods and goddesses, Bhadrakali and Hanuman and other Devis, and you name them, all the Dasha Mahavidyas are there. But the Lamas only do puja to all these. And there was a head Lama who is known as the Rinpoche, who welcomed Babaji as if you knew him for a long time, and asked us to stay and be their guests at the monastery. But Babaji never stayed in anywhere like that, so we had to pitch a tent and stay just outside the monastery. The tent was quite comfortable for about 3-4 people, so 3 of us were there. Horses were tied outside, and we spent the night. The night I had a wonderful discussion with Babaji about various things. One of them was that the Lamas of Tolingmat believed that originally Badrinath was in Tolingmat, and since it was inaccessible to most people, later on it was shifted to the place where it is now. Of course, the Lama believed that Badrinarayan is a form of Buddha because he sits in Padmasana, but that may be his belief, we are not sure. I asked Babaji about this. He said we don't enter into such controversies. Sufficient to say that if you have a religious bent of mind, if you lead a good life and if you practice meditation, that's sufficient. It doesn't matter whether Buddha is Narayana or Narayana is Buddha. Don't get into these controversies. So there was no more discussion on that subject. Anyway, spent some time there, and then I also saw some very strange sight. There are these tall Tibetan men who come from the province of Kham. If you write in English, it can be spelled as Kham, Kham district. They're very tall people, and they are usually messengers who take messages from one monastery to another. Now these people had with them long sticks, which is like a pole they use for pole vault, and when they carried messages, they used to do a certain breathing exercise, hit the pole on the ground like a pole vault, and travel quite a distance before landing. So this is why they were appointed as messengers, because they had learned the art of almost flying with the stick. This is the nearest levitation that I have seen in my life, apart from the magic tricks that are shown on stage. Anyway, so I saw them pushing, taking a deep breath and moving quite a distance before again putting the pole down. These were the messengers of the monasteries. Anyway, so after spending about 4 days and having various discussions with the Lamas about Buddhism and so on, Babaji said, now we can start for Kailash. So we started off. We had reached Tolingmat, and from there we had to go through another village. I think it was called Dhamma or Damal or something. So we reached there in about 6 days. Altogether, we camped there at that little village. Altogether, we had travelled around 21 days, starting from Mana, Badrinath. Now we halted there for the night in a tent, and that night I had such a serious fever. That the temperature was so high that I started getting convulsions. So Babaji said, no Kailash for you this time, we have to go back. I said, but Babaji, I wanted to go to Kailash. He said, you might have wanted to go to Kailash, you will go to Kailash after many, many years with a big group of people, but this time you will travel from the Nepal side. So I gave up. Anyway, I was very ill, I had high temperature, I was shivering. In fact, I thought I was having what you call, when you have high fever, hallucinations. Because I was lying in the, I was there sick for at least 4 days. I was lying in the tent on my little wooden plank when suddenly I saw the tent door open. Now the Lama was giving me medicines for the last 4 days, but this didn't seem to have any effect. I was still having high temperature. I saw somebody coming inside from the tent, from the opening door of the tent. Now this person who came from the door didn't look like a human being. He looked more like, what shall we compare with? He looked like a gorilla, something like a gorilla. I couldn't see clearly because the only light inside the tent was a small kerosene lamp which was lit, hurricane lamp which was lit by Bahadur. So in this faint light, all I could see was there was this thing looking like a monkey or a gorilla, but big size like a human being. As it walked in, and it was making a peculiar whining, thin pitched, sharp pitched voice, like that kind of sound. And it or he kept coming towards. When it passed the light, the hurricane lamp, I noticed that it had body was full of fur and there were no clothes. And the fur was kind of light, dark cream colored fur. It came straight towards me where I was lying. I was really paralyzed with fear. It looked at me and again made that whining noise. My mind went back to some comic books where the Yeti comes in the Himalayas and tries to kill people and so on. So I was paralyzed with fear, but it did nothing of the sort. It came near me and pushed something into my mouth. Some very gooey stuff like chewing gum or melted chewing gum or some very, very sweet stuff in my mouth, pushed it in with its finger and then ran out. When it was running out, the Bahadur came running in saying, "Mountain man, pahadi admi. He came running inside. He was also very frightened. He said, "Are you all right?" I said, "I am all right," and I was chewing that stuff. I swallowed it. Whole night I could not sleep because all the time I was looking at the entrance to the tent, wondering when the creature was going to come. Anyway, to cut the long story short, in about 2 hours' time, I fell asleep without my knowledge, unconsciously. And when I woke up in the morning, there was no temperature, no fever. I was perfectly all right. So Babaji said, "Okay, we pack up. We are going back to Badrinath." I said, "Babaji, I am all right now." He said, "I know you are all right. We are going back." So most of the time on the way back, I was sitting on the horse and going. So then I asked Babaji, "Babaji, do you think what I saw was a Yeti?" He said, "Let's not have a discussion. Nobody is going to believe you. Most people don't believe in its existence. And if you say you had high fever when you saw it, they would think that you were having some kind of a hallucination. So don't discuss the subject." I said, "No harm if I say I saw it." He said, "That is left to you." So we came back to Badrinath and it took us, I think, around 18 days, much less time than we took to go there. Around 18 days we were back at Badrinath and back to the cave at Charanapaduka. After I had reached there one morning, I went to see the Ravalji. I told Babaji, "I am going to see the Ravalji." He said, "Go." So I went to Ravalji and after saying namaskara and all that, I said, "How do you know Babaji? Because you are talking as if you are familiar with him." He said, "Well, I know him as a genuine yogi who lives in these areas, but I don't know anything more about him. But my forefathers have said 3 successors, and before that my father has said that they have also met him. So we don't know how old he is, although he looks around 35. He's a great yogi. You are lucky that he found you, because generally I have heard that he did not accept any disciples. So you are very lucky." So I said, "Okay." I said, "Then is he from Kerala? What do you suspect?" He said, "No, I don't think he's from Kerala. He was talking Malayalam. He said, that is, great yogis can do what they want. So I said, so you believe in great yogis because you are discouraging me. There is no. He said, I discouraged you because you don't fall into the wrong hands. There are so many ganja sadhus around here. There are so many people who are very learned and scholarly who pretend to be great yogis. So I was only trying to help you out. So I said, all right. So he said, since you are going, please take some prasad with you and go back to the cave. And if you tell Babaji that it is Badri Narayan's prasad, he will also eat it. Otherwise, I know that he doesn't usually eat. So I said, all right. So I thanked him, took the prasad and went back to the cave. Now this Charana Paduka, it's a very interesting place. After many years, both things came true. One is I took a whole group of people and went to Kailash. Two, whenever we went to Badri or Kedar with a group, we used to go to Charana Paduka and go near the caves and meditate and walk around. Many of our friends have sat with me and meditated at Charana Paduka because I believe that there is a strong presence of Sri Guru Babaji in that place. This is the importance of Charana Paduka. The Jains also come there because for them it is a holy place. One of their Tirthankaras has come there, maybe Parashwanath, I am not sure, and has done tapasya there. So they have 2 foot marks which they consider to be the Charana Padukas of their Tirthankaras. So many Jains come there on pilgrimage. If you move a little further up, the whole right side is dotted with caves. If you go further down, there is a glade where horses, you will see wild horses grazing there. It's completely green. It's a very beautiful place. Now, those who would want to go there, the best way to do would be to go to Badrinath, walk along the road that approaches Badrinath, but in the reverse direction, opposite direction, and then you find steps going up the hills from there on the right side. If you stand there and look straight on the opposite direction, you will see the Nilakant Parvat. You will see a photograph of the Nilakant Parvat on the cover page of my autobiography, especially when the sun rises. It's a beautiful sight to see because only the top becomes golden and the rest is all white and beautiful. It's a sight for poets, for artists, for people who enjoy nature to go to such places. Even if you are not religiously inclined and you don't want to go for a pilgrimage, I think it's a great idea to visit Badri, Kedar, especially in the season when the snow has not fully melted. You can see these beautiful peaks when the sun rises and the sun sets. And the whole atmosphere is so different that you would automatically get a meditative feeling. And if you sit down and meditate, there is the influence of these great beings around. Now, having said that, while staying at Charana Paduka, I used to take short walks with Babaji towards Vyasa Gufa and towards what is known as Swarga Arohini. Swarga Arohini is little beyond the Vyasa Gufa. That's supposed to be the place that goes on to Alkapuri from where Alakananda starts. And the Puranas say that when the Pandavas, after the Kurukshetra war and after Yudhishthira laid down gave up his kingdom and decided to walk out, having put his son in place, all the Pandavas walked up the same route from Mana and continued to go to the Bhimtal near Saraswati river and walk towards the, what is it called, Alkapuri. On the way, there is a spot from where Yudhishthira is supposed to have fallen. Fallen means where the Purana says where he was lifted up into heavens. Now, therefore, That place is called Swarga Arohi, that means a place from where he went off to Swarga. It's an interesting story. Yudhishthira had a dog, a pet dog, which was very dear to him. So the story is that when the chariot came, when the Pushpa Vimana came to take Yudhishthira up to Swarga, he said, "No, I cannot come alone. I have to take my dog." So he said, "But the dog has not done the punya that you have done." He said, "Either the dog comes with me or I don't go." So finally, the pilots of the Pushpa Vimana had to agree to take the cargo of the dog also along. So the dog was also booked to Swarga. Interesting story, because Yudhishthira, you will notice, was a great king who, after the Kurukshetra battle, when he became the king, he decided that he would not rule the kingdom. He was very unhappy. He said, "What is the use of a kingdom where so many people have been killed? So many of my relatives are dead. What kind of a kingdom should I rule over?" In spite of he being told by his brothers that it is not your fault that they were killed, he insisted that he would not rule the kingdom. He would rule only as long as his son is ready to take over, and then he moved off into the mountains to the Badrinath and Kedar towards his complete freedom. Therefore, he is referred to in the ancient Puranas as Dharmaraja, the king of Dharma. How many kings do we see nowadays? Who would want to give up his seat or his kingdom? It's as if they put Fevicol on the seats when they sit down and they cannot get up. So these are the great kings who are not only rulers but also great saints, people whose mind had expanded and become spiritual.